COP15. Can I have your attention, please? Because we're starting now. All right. Hi. How's it going? Okay. So tonight's panel is going to be on media perspectives on the COP15. We'll be exploring a couple of questions, both how mainstream and independent media in the blogosphere are approaching their coverage of the COP, making sense of what's happening, how are they sourcing content, and also what is their midstream analysis. How are things going? We've had a sort of dramatic turn of events over the last few days, and we got a couple more days to go. So their perspectives on what we have to expect, both from now through Friday or Saturday, and then beyond. So first, Barry, can you tell us a little bit about what happened in the last 24 hours since our last rapid response reportage? You should speak right into that.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm very grateful that I'm not talking after Kumi. In fact, I'm talking before him so I can warm you up a bit rather than trying to follow a difficult act. What's happening in the negotiations is pretty confusing and quite a poor process. So what happened today was that finally at around 6 o'clock in the morning, the long-term cooperative action, the LCA track, finished their plenary, and they finished it with an agreement after 2 years of negotiations, which was hardly to be called an agreement at all. Algeria, I think, put it, I'm not quite sure what we're agreeing, we're not actually agreeing to anything. So, you know, the negotiators didn't get far, and I think it's important to understand that the fault is not in the negotiators. And, you know, there's a lot of people who kind of get down on the negotiators, what have they been doing for the last 2 years, but actually they didn't get the political mandate to be able to negotiate. In order to be able to negotiate, they have to have the kind of political framework within which to negotiate, the parameters. So it's quite tragic for these people who have spent 2 years of their lives in these negotiations that they have got virtually nowhere. There are a few things in there that are important in the text. The negotiating draft has gone towards the right direction in some things, and particularly it's gone towards some right directions on finance. There are some pieces of the finance package that are important. So they're setting up a new mechanism, a new fund for finance, and lots of us who don't want the World Bank and the GEF and the funding stream are very pleased that something, the adaptation fund that's set up under the Kyoto Protocol or something like that will become the new funding mechanism, because that allows for better governance, transparent governance, etc. So there are some things like that that are progress. There's a bit of progress on bunker fuels, levies on bunker fuels, i.e. aviation and shipping. What they've been trying to do is to get wording in there that ensures that the industry doesn't self-regulate itself, but actually has some finance coming back to fund adaptation and mitigation for climate change. So there are some things like that on finance that are worth saving, but all of the big stuff is kicked up to ministers. Now, you know, if big issues are kicked up to ministers and there are kind of 4 or 5 of them, they might be able to make progress. But literally there's hundreds of issues that have been kicked up to ministers, and it's going to be very difficult for them to sort out. So then the high-level meeting started. And the first thing that happened was that the Danish presidency announced that Connie Hedegaard, the Danish minister, was being replaced by Rasmussen, the prime minister. Now that immediately sent sort of alarm bells in many developing countries, because they were concerned about what the prime minister had previously done to kind of slip in a draft document. If those of you remember the beginning of last week, when the Danish Prime Minister was working on a document that looked suspiciously like the United States position, but which was actually a draft of the presidency document, that was met with a pretty angry reaction from developing countries. So now the Prime Minister has taken over as chair of the negotiations, replacing Connie Hedegaard, who people trusted much more. So the first thing that happened in the high-level segment is that developing countries said, we do not accept a text coming from the Danish presidency. And that's a really important point, because what would happen is that the Danish presidency would put down a text which the developing countries, and I think many of us, would regard as a bad fudge and not necessarily the interest of a fair, ambitious and binding deal from Copenhagen. So the developing countries hung tough. They refused to accept a text, and the situation is remaining a bit confused. And the last we heard before I came to walk here was that the Danish presidency would not be introducing a text. So that's kind of important. And the downside is that they're going to have to try and negotiate from that mess of a text that comes from the officials. So that's the status. With 2 days to go, it is a real shambles. And I think we can all be deeply, deeply worried about where these negotiations are heading and what is likely to come out of it. And I would say one thing that's likely to come out of it is that the odds of a collapse suddenly got a little higher today.
Well, from doing media monitoring here in this space, the impression we were getting is that there's a process of keeping NGOs out of the Bella Center right now, which is being reflected in some of the chaos on the inside. We're wondering, this is the first that I've heard that some of the movement on finance is actually really positive. How close is it to the 200 billion by 2020 target that Tick 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 has advanced?
It possibly would have been a lot closer if the Africa group had stuck to an ambitious target. But it sounds like the Africa group has proposed a considerably lower number for long-term finance than they were asking for previously. So originally the Africa group was asking for $2 trillion. Suddenly, in a deal between Mellish and Sarkozy, that got reduced to somewhere around 145 billion, and now appears to be somewhere around 100 billion. So I think the prospects of getting 200 billion on the table partly depends on what's being asked for by some of the negotiating groups. And if they're not asking for it, then it tends to undermine our position as NGOs in pushing for it. I mean, what is absolutely clear is that we need $200 billion. You know, you need $100 billion just for adaptation in order to get help to the number of people who are suffering from climate change already. I mean, I was just going through the figures the other day. The World Health Organization is putting it at 150,000 people dying a year already from climate change. In fact, the Global Humanitarian Forum put it at 300,000. So, you know, adaptation finance will save lives. And I think for leaders not to be asking for enough in order to help their vulnerable populations is a real shame. I think as NGOs we've got to stick to our targets, we've got to keep on pushing at least $200 billion, and we've got to keep up the pressure in all of this mess for a fair, ambitious and binding deal. If we can put them under enough pressure, we can still get movement in these negotiations. They're really volatile at the moment.
So Barry, that was going to be my next question, last question for you, is you have a room full of online campaigners from NGOs who send out tweets and post to Facebook and blast out emails and newsletters to their constituencies back home, as well as bloggers who are reporting on the COP15 negotiations. And we've all, many of us for the past 2 years, set our sights towards Copenhagen as a really pivotal moment in the climate movement. So with this audience in the room, what would you have to say about how we should be communicating with our constituencies back home and what is needed to impact the next 2 days and then the next several years of the climate movement?
Yeah, I think we've got to convey a sense of crisis in the talks, but not in a disempowering way. You know, it's you've got 130 of the world's leaders, the most powerful women and men in the world convening in Copenhagen. What is it that they can't do? You know, if they get a sudden case of determination, they can agree this thing. They need to hear from people back home. This is the moment where really we need to crank up our contacts, we need to crank up our campaigns, and we need to say that anything less than a good deal here in Copenhagen is completely unacceptable. And you know, the thing is, we've got to have the right foundation for a deal set here, even if they can't do legally binding. And I think we ought to keep up the pressure on them to do a legally binding. Even if they can't do a legally binding deal, you've got to get the foundation right. Because if they step back and kind of have a wishy-washy kind of political statement and promises about how we're going to save the climate and no specifics and no draft text there and no agreement on the details, then what we're going to end up with is exactly the same kind of situation we were back in 2 years ago with a negotiating document that was hopelessly broad. So we've got to drive it through to call on them to do the specifics. We've got to crank up the pressure. If we do, then I reckon the next step is to get these ministers into rooms and call it the sleeping bag summits from now on. You don't set them a kind of, you're here for 2 days, you're here until you get the job done, you know, and bring your sleeping bag.
And I know, thank you for that, Barry. I know also one of the reasons why we didn't have Hunter and Phil here again tonight is that they are inside the Bella Center with NGO passes, and they didn't want to leave, right, with concern that they might not be able to get back in. So we really appreciate all the efforts of NGOs and civil society organizations on both the inside and outside in their efforts to affect this process, and we're not going to let up.
Hey, just one last word. I've been a board member of Tick 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 for over a year now, the GCCA, and I think GCCA has done a fabulous job under the Tick 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 campaign in convening events like this and convening spaces like this, in getting the message out. So, you know, I just want to say a personal real thanks to all of those who have worked so hard in GCCA to make this happen.
Great. Thank you. All right, thank you, Barry. Appreciate it. So we're going to get going with tonight's programming. I want to introduce Jason Mogus from the Tick campaign. He's going to come up and introduce you to our next speaker.
Hey, everybody. So, thanks. That was a really nice kind of showing of support for what we've been doing. The Tick Tick Tick, you know, is really only about a year old, and it's really been the coolest job I've ever had to work for. I do the digital stuff for Tick 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 with a huge team, and worked with Becca and Steve to pull this together about 7 weeks ago, and it's been hugely successful. But the reason why everything Tick 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 does is successful is because of two things. One is this movement is so amazing. Like, there's so many people and there's so much energy that are coming towards this movement that want to talk about it, that want to do creative things in it. But the other thing is the open model that Tick 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 runs in, where it's an open source campaign. We offer a very simple framework that people can plug into and then totally be creative inside that framework. So just like this space, you know, come use this space, be, you know, kind and conscious to your neighbors, but do whatever you need to do in this space to get the word out. And it's the same with the Tick 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 campaign itself. We have 250 partners from all over the world, from, you know, could be the most diverse coalition we've seen, from human rights to, you know, social justice to global, obviously the environmental movement. You know, a lot of the US NGOs have come on board in the last while. And I just want to say, you know, to what was just talked about around kind of moving people towards in motion right now to try to impact the negotiations. The NGOs that we're collaborating with are working their asses off right now. You see them in the Bella Center, and now we're not in the Bella Center, so we're working virtually and in other spaces just to try to engage people with this issue. Avaz just kind of put the high bar up just today, actually, to try to bring our 11 million people on the Tick campaign up to 15 by the end of the COP. So that's our latest ask, is we need to put some fire under people's butts on this global pledge campaign. There's dozens of organizations contributing to it, so that's our kind of big story of the day. But what I wanted to say about Tick is doing a lot of coordination behind the scenes. There's been constant meetings with organizations to try to coordinate actions, and then we're coordinating a public approach again, which hopefully you'll see rolling out in the next couple days. But the reason why this campaign is so amazing and why it's continued to be more than just a kind of loose, sappy coalition, which we've all been part of too many times, is really the leadership of the coalition. The leadership style, particularly my boss, Andrew Mail, at the back here, Ben Margolis, our campaigns director, who was here the other night talking about open campaigns, Kelly Rigg, are some of the key people. And, our campaign is like 60 people. It'd be impossible to mention it all. But, it all comes back to the top at some point, and Kumi Naidoo as our chair really reflects the leadership style that a campaign of this style needs. It's a listening leadership style, it's a collaborative leadership style, but it's also a movement leadership style, and it's a get things done leadership style. So we're super excited to have Kumi in the space for the first time. He's Mr. Everywhere. He's probably going to 4 more places tonight. But Kumi is the executive director of Greenpeace International. He has a history and more on the through Civicus, through work in the Global South with GCAP on the Make Poverty History campaign. And he's been our board chair since the start, I think, because all of us are kind of new in some ways to Tick, Tick, Tick. So enough about Kumi from me. I'm going to let Kumi do what he does best, which is rouse you up. So Kumi, come to the stage.
Thanks, Jason. Good evening, everybody. Just to correct one thing, actually, the first chair of the Tick, Tick, Tick campaign was Barry Coates, who you just heard. He was struggling to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, New Zealand time, for too many conference calls, so he handed it over to me. So friends, right now, the pundits say it's all over. That in fact, we're not going to get a deal, that it's going to collapse. That might very well be so. But this, remember this, it was on the last day, in the last plenary at the Bali conference, when everybody thought it was lost, when there was an intervention from the floor by Papua New Guinea, which said to President Bush's delegation, if you don't want to get to the program, get out of the way and let us move. And President Bush had to go and revise his position, and we actually got a roadmap to get here to Copenhagen. So, as you know, in some countries, they have this phrase where they say, it ain't over until the fat lady sings. Yeah, we are saying it ain't over until the thin man in Washington, D.C. signs on the dotted line a fair, ambitious, and legally binding treaty. We have to understand that what we're dealing with right now is survival. We have to understand, and the politicians need to understand, that in fact, time is running out. That it is still within their grasp, it is still within their power, it hopefully is still within their sense of decency and their sense of justice to actually do the right thing. They cannot, after 2 years of negotiating and more than 12 negotiating sessions, this year alone, 3 in Bonn, 1 in Bangkok, 1 in Barcelona, after all of that, they cannot tell us that they cannot actually move forward. Now let us just be very clear on what's holding things back right now. On cash, as Barry said, there's been some movements in the right direction. It's not what the science and the economists and even hardly a radical organization, the World Bank, even agrees with us that we need 140 billion at least per year in terms of financing. And here we have to begin to ask the question about political will. Because if overnight, 18 months ago, they could mobilize not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars to bail out the banks, the bankers, and their bloody bonuses, surely they can find the resources to bail out the climate and essentially bail out the future of our children. On targets, I'll tell you, Tony Blair has been floating around here. Given that he's had such a great success with the Middle East peace process, he's come here to help with solving the climate crisis. And he's famous for using this phrase, which he used when I was on a panel with him with Ban Ki-moon earlier in September, where he said, you folks need to be very careful that you don't make perfect the enemy of the good, right? Well, if it was good, that's one thing. And let's be very clear, perfect would have been if we were able, 30 years ago, to take action to prevent the Himalayan glaciers from melting. Perfect would have been good if we prevented Lake Chad from drying up, which is one of the biggest drivers of the genocide in Darfur. Perfect would have been if we prevented the desertification in so many countries like northern Kenya that is having a huge impact on the livelihoods of large numbers of people, and particularly women, because in Africa, we have a large number of farmers, small-scale farmers that are women. Now, what I want to say is that when we look at climate change right now, we need to begin to understand that, in fact, climate change intersects with many of our different struggles. I've just made the connection with gender equity, and we can connect it with poverty, we can connect it to human rights, we can connect it to questions of governance, of how we govern this planet. But what can we do now with time running out for this conference? We know time is running out for the planet. That's why we called our campaign Tick, Tick, Tick. But this conference has 48 hours left to go, and what can we do? I would say that we need to put all our focus on Barack Obama. Right now, there are some of our colleagues in Washington, D.C. that are delivering an open letter to President Obama before he gets on the plane tomorrow. That letter is already up on the Greenpeace site. It will be up on the tickticktick.org website. I would like to make an appeal to all of you to do whatever you can to get that letter out to as many places as you can, and to use the power that you have to actually get the kind of awareness globally so that we keep the pressure on him. I think he is not beyond being moved. He understands that we have a planet in peril, a phrase he used many times during his campaign. He understands the fierce urgency of now, another favorite phrase that he used during the elections, and he knows, yes, we can, and all we're saying to him, yes, we can, is only the first part of that slogan. He needs to say, yes, we can, yes, we must, yes, we will deliver a fair, ambitious, and binding treaty by the time they all leave Copenhagen on the 18th of December. Lastly, I just want to say, on a lighter note, what we expect when we came here was Copenhagen will be remembered as Hopenhagen, not a Floppenhagen or an Openhagen. And myself, like my hero, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I'm a prisoner of hope, and I hope that all of you will continue to believe in the next 48 hours we can shift the agenda and make sure that we don't throw in the towel until it's actually over. Thank you very, very much. Sorry, I was asked to tell you that there are tick, tick, tick badges that you are very welcome to help yourself to. And I was also asked to tell you that there are some playing cards from the UN Foundation, which you're also very, very welcome to take before you leave tonight. Thank you.
Is your letter on the Greenpeace.org website?
On the homepage.
On the homepage.
Yeah, Greenpeace.org. You just go a little bit below, on the bottom part of the homepage.
That's where your letter is. So
Yeah.
you can share with people.
Yes, and it'll be on the Tick 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 website as well in the next hour or so.
Great. Thanks.
Thumbs up. All right. Thank you so much, Kumi Naidoo. We really appreciate you being here and your words that were really rousing. I think it's been a little demoralizing, to be honest, here in the Fresh Air Center today as we're looking at all the intel that's coming through on the Climate Insider listserv and doing our media monitoring, watching television and checking out the blogs and posts and so on. And I appreciate your message of hope. I think it's I want to underscore something you said, which is that, you know, we found the funding for the bank bailouts and for the wars, and we're asking for a fraction of that every year. It's a question of political will, right? And the will of the people is obvious. It's been represented. We have more than 11 million signatures on the Tick 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 site, and we're going to make it up to 15 million with your help by the end of the week. So it's absolutely crucial that we continue to keep up the fight, right? To make sure that our leaders are held accountable and that they know that we have their back. We have their back to do the right thing. Yeah. Are there any questions for Kumi? Great. Why don't you come up? Why don't you come up and identify yourself with your name and affiliation?
Hello, so my name is John Manasheri from Resource Vision Design Group and Stockholm Architecture School. And the question is this: everyone here absolutely buys into the sense that we have run out of time, tick, 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 And I think everyone would not wish to foreclose the options in the last 48 hours. But my concern is this with the Tick, Tick, Tick campaign and the leadership of it is you have, as far as I can see, no plan B. Where does the brand and the energy of Tick, Tick, Tick go if it fucks up? Because you've invested in winning the deal. And my concern is that in actual fact, there's so much creativity and power and engagement that could continue without a deal succeeding, that if the only win is the deal, that we lose that momentum. So what I want to know is, we obviously don't have a planet B, but what's Tick, Tick, Tick's plan B for when the deal goes down, either by being a fudge or by being a complete collapse?
Good question, thank you. Even if, come 18th of December, we have a fair, ambitious and legally binding treaty, the real struggle actually starts on 18th of December to make sure that we hold our governments accountable to deliver with the urgency that is needed. So it is envisaged anyway that the struggle continues. We are having a board meeting tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, where one of the questions we are talking about is how do we keep momentum beyond the summit here in Copenhagen. And just to be clear, we are looking at how do we actually continue to build this movement that we've generated in a short space of time. And the bottom line is, much as I think it's critically important that we shoot for the 15 million figure and hopefully exceed it, we only can take comfort and sit down on our backsides when actually we have about 3 billion people on this planet that are actually engaged, at least. So we got a long, long way to go. And so we are very clear about that. And of course, many of the organizations that are involved in the Tick, Tick, Tick campaign certainly have, huge plans for next year and so on. The question is, can we stay together, united as a Tick, Tick, Tick campaign? And I can't speak for everybody right yet before the meeting. And I'm a very consensual chair of the Tick, Tick, Tick board. But I think that my gut is that people are game for us to continue. And that would have happened whether we got a fab deal or not. So I think you can rest assured, with the support of all the folks, like people in the room here today, we have to continue. There's no question about it.
We have time for one more question for Kumi. Can you come up? And yeah, I'll just say you're talking to a room full of organizers and bloggers and media makers as well, but we eat, live, breathe, sleep this stuff, and we're not going to go away. We've been having these conversations for a long time, and I think everyone's cognizant that this movement doesn't end on Friday or Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Frank. I'm with the Sierra Club in the United States. Barack Obama, I'm sure, would, if he had the power to do what you're requesting, would do it in a second. What makes you think he has the authority to do what you're asking him to do? The United States is a democracy. There's a lot of people, and I'm not one of them, but there are a lot of people that don't agree with what we all want to do here.
Okay, thank you. I think our disappointment with President Barack Obama, especially somebody, I must confess, I was anal about his campaign. I visited the blogs 3 times a day to check opinion polls every day since the Iowa primary, and felt extremely, one of the best days of my life really was when he was visited. I made sure there was a meeting. I was in New York when he was elected. But he has not used his political capital in the same way that he has done so with healthcare. I think he needed to have gone to the American people much more earlier, and that is a problem. However, when we look at the legal room that he has to maneuver right now, it requires risk. And what we're talking about here is leadership risk, not to behave as a conventional politician. And we see that the EPA endangerment ruling, for folks that don't know, the Environmental Protection Agency, in terms of the Clean Air Act, gave an endangerment ruling which actually says that he has authority, and it's now accepted legally, that the emissions are a threat to health and welfare of the American people and of course of people around the world. We think that they suppressed that ruling which came out just 10 days ago. I think that that does give him room to maneuver, and I think that we are not insensitive to his dilemma, and we know that his heart is with us. All we would say is he needs to actually take a risk here, and I think sometimes good leaders actually take risks, and that is what is called upon. And I don't think it's as straight and clear cut that he has absolutely no room to maneuver at the summit.
And there's a lot of organizations from the U.S. in the room who played a really big role in helping to get Obama in office and continue to play a role in giving him a political mandate, issue after issue, day after day, month after month, to be sure that he continues to hold up to his promises, because the president is as powerful as the people are, right? So thank you so much, Kumi.
Thank you, everybody.
Please.
And can I say one appeal? We would really appreciate it if you can keep the focus on President Obama. Please spread that letter, especially to American colleagues, friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends, anybody, get the word out. I think let's not throw in the towel until it's over. Thank you very, very much.
So now I want to introduce Kevin Grandia. He's a blogger. He's been very the founder of Desmog blog, vital contribution to the climate movement. He's been working with environmental organizations for the past many years, specifically around climate campaigns, including Greenpeace and Rainforest Action Network and others. Mainstream and independent blogosphere media. So Kevin, please come on up and let us know what we had to expect.
I follow all of you on Twitter.
Apparently we all follow you.
So we have a really exciting panel tonight.